Welcome to This is Concrete, a podcast where we speak with the people whose work revolves around concrete and coatings. Let's get to what you came for.
Okay, so this is Chad Gill. This episode, we're going to do things a little bit different. Instead of me asking the questions, we've got Dr. Jeremy Weiss here, along with Dee Klevit. She has worked with me for the last year, documenting processes and procedures within my company. So we're going to talk a little bit about how you can move your company to the next level utilizing process documentation and perhaps humor and other things such as that.
So this episode is actually about how do you get your business to the next level. And I'm here with Chad Gill and Dee Klevit, and we're going to dig deep on this very topic. You know, this is a topic every business owner wants to know about. How do I get to the next level and grow and not and be able to sleep at night and not be totally stressed out of my mind. So, but we'll start off with Chad. Just give people an overview a little bit about your company and what you do.
So I own a company called Concreate. We do concrete grinding and polishing of concrete floors. You know, we kind of do anything with concrete other than pour it, because you have to get up super early in the morning to pour concrete. So we come in after that and we do applied finishes and that kind of thing. We run remote crews, you know, up and down the East Coast mostly.
Dee, tell
Yes,
people
hi,
a little
Jeremy.
bit about what you do.
Yes, so we create, document, and implement processes and procedures for businesses.
And so you have worked together on some projects. And Chad, before we hit record, you were saying something about having a PTSD.
Yeah. So
what were you referring to?
So COVID, you know, I mean, as so many podcasts and stories and relationships started and ended in COVID, we were similar in that we got through work-wise pretty good, but then coming out of the tail end of it, under the stresses of it and those kind of things, we had an exodus of people. And I was determined to never be held hostage by my employees again. And the reason I was held hostage is because we hadn't, you know, I had people that knew how to do what they were doing. They were good at it. Things got handled. And I relied on them so much because I never really paid attention to what they were doing, as long as everything was going well. And the problem is when somebody up and says, hey, I'm going to leave or else, and you're like, well, I don't even know what they do, much less how to do what they do, then you're really hung out there. And that made for a painful thing. I mean, my ego was way too big to allow them to stay, and my fear was too small. So, you know, now I'm sleeping better, but I'm trying to make up for the hours lost during that time.
Yeah. So we'll talk about the journey from being held hostage to sleeping better, right? And maybe that should be the title of this. This is not an FBI hostage negotiator one like Chris Voss, but this is a don't get held hostage from staff, right? By making sure what, Dee, I know what you're going to say. What do businesses come to you with, and what do you find that they need so they're not held hostage?
Well, they need a processes and procedures, of course, but that also leads into the knowledge transfer, which is part of it, because the hostage, what they're really holding hostage is the knowledge that they have, right? The experience, the expertise, the hard-won experience and knowledge. So that is where the knowledge transfer is so important. So you're actually transferring that knowledge. So you are not when the employees leave, you're not. They're not living with the knowledge, but also you are then able to hire new employees. You know, you go, okay, so they left. I get it. Fine. You know, it has whatever the emotional ramifications that come with that, but you are also able to then replace very easily because you have a training system in place.
Yeah, I mean, there's a positive part about it. Just doesn't have to be a reactive piece where someone leaves, but it could be if you're growing and you need to onboard, you need to train, you need to hire, you can streamline that if you already have those procedures in place. And it also, as you know, like the current staff is already really busy. They're like, I don't have time to train this new well, if you have these procedures, they can probably rest easier too, because there's something in place that takes it off of their plate too, right?
Correct.
Sure. I mean, your stress reduction is a part of it. And I'd like to tell you that I was smart enough to be concerned about the stress part of it, but it's the numbers, the financial aspect of, I can either go hire somebody that already knows how to do what I want to do and they come in and magically make it happen, or I can hire a lower level, lower cost person, come in and put them in, and they play the games by the rules that we've set up. And it's a much easier hire to make. And then you bring them on. So you do save a lot of money just through that feature of it.
That's a good point. And Chad, you mentioned you had this happen, and then I know you and Adi have done some work together. When you first started that work, what did that look like?
It was done. So I started it without Adi, super poorly, because I'm an engineer, so I was convinced I knew everything anyway. So that was the approach that I took. And then after a false start for a couple of months and stuff, it was the idea of this daunting task. I need to document my company, and I knew everybody told me I needed to do it, but it's like not knowing where to start. It's where do you want to eat? Well, you got all the restaurants in the city. You don't know what you want until somebody says, "How about chicken?" You're like, "I don't want chicken." So it was, it's like you start narrowing things down, and that's where Adi came in. Her team comes in and just kind of had that well-beaten path of, hey, I'm just going to talk to you. And then it's almost a frustrating conversation a couple of times. She's like, well, they do that. She's like, okay, that's great. Who's they? And what exactly do they do? And how did they know? And and you're like, well, I don't know. I've always said they, So it was a lot of that going on. But then you pull a lot of that data out of a person, and suddenly you find out, you really do have all of this information. It was siloed in different places. And it's not just me as the owner. It was siloed in other employees that we had, and sometimes in employees that we lost.
It's really important that I find that someone who doesn't do the work comes in to document it, because you really have to explain every bit of it, because the person coming on new isn't going to know anything, right? So Adi, talk about why processes and some of your approach to that, because you work with a lot of businesses.
Sure. So why processes, I think we covered in terms of training, onboarding, risk mitigation, in terms of like if you have a key employee that is leaving, making sure that you have repeatable processes so all the outcomes are the same, knowledge transfer, making the business more attractive for selling, for merging, acquisition, whatever the path is going to be in the future for the business, definitely for scaling. So that's why processes. And in terms of like how to do it successfully, it's really taking the key employees. I know some of our listeners are going, well, what if those employees left? Well, hopefully you're doing it beforehand, right? Because if not, you have to, then you just deal with the people that are left, or with the business owner. Like in Chad's, I think Chad, we document the majority where you were the one who was documenting it because you wanted to do it the way that you wanted it. So I mainly ended up talking to you, but when we did the sales processes, then I talked to your sales manager before, so I talk to other stakeholders or other employees as well, but it depending on who is there. So let's say you're doing it before your key employees are leaving. So then you choose who are the employees that you want to clone, that are doing it the best, that you want to extract the information from. And then we work with those employees in terms of figuring out what is the process, what are the procedures, what are the different things that they're doing, how do they do that. And that is the documentation part. But then there is also the process improvement, the figuring out, I should do it this way, or I can do it that way, or I can change it, or I can maybe do it differently, or maybe this is where my success is because this is the proven process, so I should not change that. So that is important as well.
Chad, go ahead, Chad, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it was something, so, Adi is a long-term looking, deep thinking person. And me, I was much more of, I need an immediate return. And I didn't expect that. I thought this is an investment I'm making into my company, and I didn't expect this big return right away. But we had a situation, and it was like a super simple thing of, we had 3 people doing one job, one task. And all 3 of them thought they were doing it as a favor to one of the other 2, all the way around. So then there's this growing dissatisfaction of that person never does this part of their job, when in fact it was never assigned to anybody. And so you've got people trying to do it, and so maybe if I had documented better in the very beginning, I wouldn't have lost, one of those people or something like that. But there was an immediate return there. But more importantly, is like, when you go through and you have to explain it to somebody, like you said, that doesn't know how to do what you're talking about, then suddenly I found out, well, that's not even how I think we should do it. And it was the refining of the processes, the defining of how my company was going to run. That was immediate return. The efficiencies that we gained, the moments that we captured of, well, why don't we just load before and then why don't we check out after and do these kinds of things? Those were immediate, those, like, when I talk to people about documenting their processes, they're like, well, I'm not looking to sell or I'm not looking to merge. I'm like, yeah, that's because you couldn't if you had to. But if you just want to run better, it's about having a rule book, and that makes it better. And it affects everything from your culture to your morale to your efficiency, and most important to me is your profit. It's just, and you sleep better when you're making money, not because necessarily you're making money, but because that things are running smoothly, and that's kind of how you keep score.
Yeah. Chad, I'd love to hear any efficiency that stuck out to you because you refined this process and you were forced to refine it. But I just want to, before you answer that, a DI, and Chad, I've heard if someone's listening to this and if they're thinking of a staff member and they get nervous or they start to sweat a little bit if that person leaves, that's a sure sign that something needs to be documented, right?
For sure.
Heard time and time again, like, oh my God, I don't know what happened if that person left. Well, boom, that's exactly what we're talking about, right?
That's right there. And I think our listeners should actually do this exercise right now in terms of, like, think about your business and where in the business you have that feeling that if there is a specific person that if they left, wow, this whole, it's like not even, maybe not a big wow, but even a little bit, where do you worry? What is the worry here? Like, where do you don't, if you're talking about not sleeping at night, what is it that's keeping you up at night? What area of the business? And that's where you should start. And it doesn't mean that the employee is going to leave. It doesn't mean at all. And it also, sometimes we get that resistance where we go in and the employees feel like, okay, I'm not going to give the knowledge because that means that I'm then dispensable. I can be done away with, and and they don't need me anymore. But that's not really the case. That is not how we approach it. It's all about process improvement and making your life, the business owner and the employees' lives better in terms of being more efficient, being able to produce more, being able to work as a team. And look what happened with Chad, with you, with your team. You have an amazing team right now that is totally on board, willing to work together. Yes, there are the inefficiencies here and there that have to be, it's a continual improvement, that's for sure. But it doesn't mean that if you start documenting is because you are letting somebody go. It's really because you care about the team and you want to make the entire operation more efficient.
Oh, absolutely. And it's one of those things, a lot of times when people leave, they're leaving because they don't feel appreciated. And that can be a couple of different reasons. Sometimes you really don't appreciate them, and that's a whole different podcast. But it's when you go to document that process, you don't realize what they're doing, or they don't realize the value or the volume of what they're doing. If you're listening to this and you're like, hey man, I want to move my company to the next level, you're not sitting around a group of people who are chock full of free time and you're just looking for something for them to do. You're trying to carve time away from them to push it down levels so they can do what it is they're really, really good at. Moving into that sweet spot or their, unique quality and stuff like that. You're trying to maximize that. And that's huge. As far as efficiencies, it's lots of small things that add up to a big number. It's simple things like, when we fully documented our project management position, we needed to add a project manager. Well, it's hard to find people. Everybody's complaining about finding people and stuff like that. But because we could document it fully, we could then search worldwide for a project manager, because we determined between COVID and process documentation that we could have a virtual project manager. And that means, and it doesn't mean that you're outsourcing to another country necessarily. It could be that you've got a guy who lives in a cabin in Utah who retired from project management and is looking to do something, but he doesn't have to travel. And now you've got this wealth of information that you can now afford and put in play, and it just makes everybody's life better. So, I mean, that's a pretty simple one. A more direct one is the idea that sales would then document all of the stuff that they did for their contract, but then nobody was responsible. So then project management would try and go and figure out, okay, well, who's doing the certificate of insurance? Who's doing this? And if you don't know who's doing it, and then you put in a billing, and we do billings that are hundreds of thousands of dollars, and then you get a call from the person who's like, hey, I was trying to get my money. And they're like, well, we were going to send it, but your certificate of insurance is out of date. So it got delayed a month. That's painful. And that's the kind of thing that a process fixes.
I want to just hear from both of you, just any final thoughts on getting the business to the next level and how kind of documentation and processes works into that. So any final thoughts on anything we didn't cover that someone listening is thinking, well, how important is this really? Where should I start?
For me, I would absolutely start by saying, don't follow the path I took. Just trust me on the idea. I had a guy tell me one time that I would run a better chiropractic business than I would a concrete polishing business. And I was like, well, why in the world would I do that? And he goes, you don't think you're a chiropractor. You're pretty sure you can do all of your polishing. And so it was a matter of staying out of the business. For me, that means I don't believe that I'm a great process documenter. And so go and find somebody that can do that. And I'll go do polished concrete and let that happen, because maintaining processes, I believe you can do in-house. But if you can get that big, daunting task started correctly, but it is well worth the effort and the savings in time. It happens so much faster.
I mean, without the pun, but it is like laying a foundation, right? I mean, you lay the proper foundation, which is kind of what you do, and what the surrounding companies you work with do, that holds the whole building up.
Yeah, I can change my oil, but I can't build my engine. And it's that big a difference. It's huge. And also, a D's team is so fast that they document it and then you're using it. I think when I was doing it, trying to do it myself, and people I run into who try to do themselves, they're documenting it, and they're documenting it the way they did it 6 months ago. By the time they're in a state of constant not using, because they're still changing.
And just to piggyback on that, Chad, for a second, like you said, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. And you were saying, like, you'll stick to what you do best and you'll hire someone out of what their expertise is. And D, talk about final thoughts on getting the business to the next level in processes.
Well, my final thoughts on this is, like, Chad is such a great example of that, because he always looks at how to grow, how to do better, what tools to implement. And Chad, and you can back it up or to say, no, it's not, it's incorrect. But I think you really got it to the point where you can scale up from there, right? I mean, you encountered and you look at opportunities and you were able to see opportunities that they might have been there, but you wouldn't have done anything if you didn't have the order that you put into the business, right? You were able to expand your marketing efforts. You were able to look at different options and opportunities. I mean, that is what you described in terms of actually be able to hire outside of the geographical area. But there is so much more in terms of all the other activities in all areas of your life. It just basically translated in expansion and more expansion and more expansion. And being also able to help your fellow contractors now as a coach as well. You did it. So now you can actually take it to others and say, look, I did it. I figured out the way. I know how to do it. I can help you. And that is something that Chad is doing now. And it's because he put in enough order, enough systems, and made everything methodical so it can actually be duplicated.
Yeah, it's like Facebook. If you look at somebody's Facebook feed, it looks like they are forever having a great time and physically fit. But you're looking at their highlights. And when you're documenting your processes, you're documenting the best way you've ever done anything you did. And so when you follow that, your performance excels, because that's how you tell people how to do it. When you're just going, if you don't have a process to follow and you just do something by the way you feel that day, well, Mondays always turn out lower quality work than Thursdays. Fridays are the worst quality and terrible efficiency. But it's just a matter of it's getting that best case scenario in every moment of what you're doing. That's the goal.
I just want to thank both of you. I want to encourage people to check out future episodes and past episodes of the podcast. And if each of you could just point people towards where should they check out online, D, where should people go online to learn more?
It's a System Simplified podcast. And you can also go to my website, which is bizsuccesscg.com.
And Chad?
My podcast is This is Concrete, and it's basically centered around these kinds of things. And we also have a second podcast called Workforce Recon, called Get the Intel. Both of those deal with these types of topics.
Thank you both. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to This is Concrete. We look forward to you joining us next time. Be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.